Most war movies are Hollywood bullshit. These ones aren't. Every film on this list actually happened, and some of the real events were so fucked up the movies had to tone them down. During World War II, the British had a problem. The Germans controlled these massive dams that were critical to their industrial output, and regular bombs couldn't touch them. They were too well defended. An engineer named Barnes Wallis came up with a solution that sounded completely insane. Build a bomb that skips across water like a stone, bounces right up to the dam wall, sinks down, and explodes underwater. Military officials thought he was crazy, but Wallis built it anyway. The Dam Busters follows the real story of Operation Chastise, how Wallis solved the technical problem of making a bomb skip on water, and how Wing Commander Guy Gibson trained his squadron to fly dangerously low at night to deploy them. The mission succeeded. They destroyed the dams, but 53 airmen died in the operation. What made the film unusual in 1955 was how much attention it paid to the engineering side. Most war movies focused on the brave men in combat. This one showed that the technical work, all the failed tests, all the problem solving, was just as crucial as the actual raid, and it didn't shy away from showing that success came at a real cost. Audie Murphy came home from World War II as the most decorated American soldier in the entire war. In 1949, he wrote a memoir about it, growing up poor in Texas during the Depression, then his time fighting across Europe. Hollywood bought the rights. They wanted to make a movie. Murphy said fine, but he had one condition. He'd play himself. So in 1955, the actual guy who lived through all of this stood in front of cameras and reenacted his own combat experiences. The movie was huge when it came out. People packed theaters to see the real Audie Murphy, not some actor pretending. For 1955, the battle sequences were pretty intense. People weren't used to that level of violence on screen. Years later, people would point out how sanitized it was. But in the 50s, it was as real as Hollywood was willing to go. Samuel Fuller fought in World War II. He was there for D-Day, saw the push across Europe, witnessed the liberation of Nazi concentration camps in Czechoslovakia. After the war, he became a filmmaker, and in 1980, he finally made a movie about what he went through. The Big Red One follows a sergeant, played by Lee Marvin, leading young soldiers through the war. But Fuller didn't make it like other war films from that era. There's no clear narrative about fighting for a greater cause, just men trying to stay alive. When the soldiers reached the concentration camps, Fuller showed what he remembered seeing. No softening it, no cutting away, just the brutal reality of what was there. January 1945, the Philippines. The Japanese were holding over 500 Allied prisoners of war at a camp in Cabanatuan, and as American forces moved closer, the Japanese planned to execute all of them. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Mucci and Captain Robert Prince led a rescue mission. They got all 500-plus prisoners out alive. It became the most successful prisoners' rescue in American military history. In 2005, Hollywood made a movie about it, and almost nobody saw it. The movie focuses on the tactics, the planning, the tension of whether they can pull this off before the prisoners are killed. It's grounded in how the actual mission went down, methodical, high stakes based on real military operations. But the Great Raid got buried when it was released. Bad timing, weak marketing, something went wrong. A film about one of the most successful rescue operations ever just disappeared at the box office. In the late 1930s, Nicholas Winton worked in London. As the Nazis occupied Czechoslovakia, Winton and a small team organized the evacuation of over 600 children, most of them Jewish, to safety in Britain. They saved hundreds of lives. Then Winton never talked about it. For over 40 years, almost nobody knew what he'd done. In 1988, a British talk show found out about the story. They invited Winton on as a guest but didn't tell him why. The cameras started rolling and the host asked if anyone in the audience was there because of Winton's actions during the war. The entire audience stood up, every single person. They were the children he'd saved, now adults with their own families. Winton had no idea they were going to be there. One Life tells that story. Anthony Hopkins plays the older Winton, and the film sticks close to what actually happened. How Winton organized the evacuations, how the story stayed buried for decades, and what happened when it finally came out. People started calling him the English Schindler after that. Ray Mendoza is an Iraq War veteran who got trapped in a house in Ramadi with his unit when insurgents pinned them down. Guys were hit, they couldn't evacuate, and Mendoza watched friends die while trying to keep everyone alive. Years later, he co-directed a film about it with Alex Garland, not as a consultant giving notes, as the actual co-director making a movie about the worst day of his life. They shot it in real time. The entire film plays out in the same time frame as the actual event. No time jumps, just the chaos of being trapped with wounded men and no way out. The movie's dedicated to SEAL Elliot Miller, who died that day. When the guy who lived through it is behind the camera, you don't get the sanitized Hollywood version. You get exactly what Mendoza saw when his friends were bleeding out in front of him. People are calling it the most realistic combat footage ever filmed. Hal Moore commanded the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry at the Battle of Ia Drang in 1965, the first major battle between American and Vietnamese forces in Vietnam. His men got overwhelmed by wave after wave of attacks, and Moore spent the fight trying to keep his battalion from getting wiped out. Decades later, Moore wrote a book about it with Joseph Galloway, a war correspondent who was there during the battle. The book was called We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and it came straight from their first-hand accounts. The film adaptation starring Mel Gibson stays pretty close to what Moore and Galloway wrote. There's some Hollywood dramatization, but the core is there. Ia Drang was relentless, and it showed American forces that Vietnam wasn't going to be the war they expected. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge killed over 1 million people during their ethnic cleanse in Cambodia. Most filmmakers wouldn't touch that subject, or if they did, they'd soften it. Roland Joffe didn't soften anything. The mass killings, all the bodies, the scale of the genocide, he put it all on screen and refused to look away. Sidney Schanberg was a journalist stuck in Cambodia during the genocide with his translator Dith Pran, who was Cambodian and therefore a target. Schanberg wrote a book about Dith afterwards called The Death and Life of Dith Pran. Joffe adapted that book into The Killing Fields, and the British Film Institute put it in their top 100 films of the 20th century. He made a film about one of the worst genocides in modern history and showed exactly what it looked like. Glory bombed at the box office. Robert G. Shaw's all-black regiment fighting in the Civil War, Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman delivering incredible performances, and theaters were empty. Then high school history teachers started showing it in class. The film found its audience through education instead of entertainment, and it mattered because most Civil War movies focus on white soldiers and white perspectives. Glory showed black soldiers fighting for their freedom while facing prejudice from the army they were serving. Shaw's battalion fought and died, and for years their story was a footnote in Civil War history. Glory pulled it out of the footnotes and put it on screen. The film didn't make money in theaters, but it ended up in classrooms across the country, making sure people knew what Shaw's men went through. The title here basically spoils the ending. 4 Navy SEALs went into Taliban territory in Afghanistan in 2005, and the movie's called Lone Survivor, so you know 3 of them aren't making it back. Marcus Luttrell was the one who survived. He wrote a book about the mission, how it went sideways, how his teammates died, how he lived when he shouldn't have. Director Peter Berg adapted it, and they added fictional elements that weren't part of the real mission. Even a movie based on a true story needs Hollywood additions to work. That hurts the credibility, but it's honest about what it is. A dramatization of real events, not a documentary. Luttrell's 3 teammates died in those mountains. The movie tells you that up front and makes you watch it happen anyway. No mystery about who survives, just the question of how it all went wrong.